Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, have I got a lovely couple of hours ahead of me. I've popped out of the house, I've just had to dust a few cobwebs off. I've popped over to Shearsby Valley Lakes. It's literally, what, 2 or 3 miles away from my house, so it's really handy. Getting really well with the owners here. I've just popped to the bait shed. I've got myself half a pint of pinkies. That should last me more, that should be more than enough bait for what I'm looking to do. And I've dropped on to Sunset Lake. There you go, you can see that behind me. It's a beautiful little lake, loads of fish in here. We could catch 10, 15 different species today. It could be a really interesting little session. So I'm already set up. I'm going to get to my peg and then I'm going to run through how I'm going to approach this session, kit, rigs, bait, all of it. So folks, before we get started, I just want to run through what I've actually done since I put my kit down. I've got my rig, I'll talk about that in a little bit, but first things first, plumb the depth. I've had a plumb around, I know the contours of the lake roughly, but I still need to put a plummet on and have a plumb around. Now, it's really deep in front of me, it's sort of like 7, 8, 9, 10 metres. That's okay. It's quite a mild day though today, so I imagine that the fish are going to be in some shallower water. Fortunately, on this lake, there's a sunken island, and that starts at about 13 metres. So I've had a plumb around, I've actually gone 4.5 metres. I'm on the flat area of that sunken island, and it's about, what's that? It's about 2.5 foot deep, which I think for today, for the size of fish that we're looking to catch, is going to be ideal. Now, kicking off the peg. I'm going to start the peg, just give it a bit of a kick start. I'm going to use a little bit of ground bait, but I'm not going to mix up a load of ground bait. Like I say, it's winter. The fish probably don't want loads of food. They just want something in the water just to kick start the day. So, I've just got a pole pot here, filled it up with water, and I'm going to use a bit of swim stim black. And I'm just going to pour in a tiny amount of swim stim black, not a load. I'm going to give it a bit of a mix up, and hopefully you can see it's like a soup. And that's just going to hang in the water, cloud really well, and hopefully instantly attract a few fish. I'm just going to put in sort of maybe 10 pinkies in there, just as a bit of a kickstarter as well. Because obviously they're my hook baits. And I'm going to cup in, there's probably half a potful there of really sloppy ground bait. I'm going to pop that in right on my marker. I don't mind about it spreading out too much. It's all about just attracting fish to the area at the minute. It's all the way out to the end of the section. And then we're going to just pop that in. Wash the pot out. We're just looking for a really big cloud. We're just trying to pull a few fish into the area. There we go. Now I'm just going to give that a couple of minutes just to settle. Hopefully a few fish will get a little bit of confidence while that's settling. And let me talk you through the rig that I'm using. So, really light float. It's a 4x10s float. It's actually a handmade float, a Gaz Malman float. Quite a fine bristle, 1.5mm bristle. It's got a carbon stem. Now I like carbon stems on floats that are like 4x10 and below. It just follows, that carbon stem just sinks through the water a little bit slower. It just follows the hook bait. Ideally you want the stem to be pointing at your hook bait all the time. That means that your rig's nice and direct. Just follows the hook bait through the water nicely. So for a strung out rig in shallow water, carbon stem is the way to go. Now, I talk about strung out rigs. I've got 5 number 10 shot on there. They're actually slot shot. And they're spread out through the rig, so we get a nice slow fall of the bait. I've got a 4-inch hook length. That hook length is actually 0.8mm diameter, so really fine hook length, and I've got a size 18 hook on. So quite a small hook. It's quite a small 18. It's a 6313, which is it's quite an old school hook really, but obviously it's barbless to conform to the rules here. Main line is 0.12 on this rig. I want quite a light main line because what I'm going to do is I'm going to fish with quite a long line between my pole tip and float. I've probably got, I mean, what's that? Maybe a metre of line between pole tip and float. For me, that is a mega long line. And there's no wind today. I want that light main line to act really nicely, and I want to get my pole as far away from my float as possible. So I think by keeping my pole tip off the water, obviously you'll notice as well I'm using a white top kit. I'm just trying to put all the odds in my favour, and I'm hoping to spook the fish in my peg. As I say, it's only 2.5 foot deep out there. Those fish are going to be spooked so easily. Plan for the day feeding wise. I've got a little pot on the end of my pole, little grip effects pot. I've cut a little hole out the top of it. I'm going to fill the pot with pinkies and then just gradually throughout the day dripping some bait. It might be a case of dripping in, you know, a full pot of pinkies and catching a fish and then shipping back, or it might be a case of dripping in 2 or 3 pinkies, missing a bite, dripping in 2 or 3 more pinkies and feed a bit more frequently to actually trick those fish into taking the hook bait. I'm really excited to have a go. Okay, I'll fill the pot up. I'm going to start on double pinky. I'm going to fill this little pot up and see what we can catch. Now, there's loads of species in here. There's F1s, little carp. There's nothing massive because I think they take all the big carp out of this lake and put them in the other lakes. But there's F1s, some little carp, some skimmers, bream. There's eyed, there's crusions, there's loads of different species. Tench, barbel, you name it, there's fish in here. Now, I'm going to fill up that pot. A nice trick, if you're ever using maggots or pinkies in a pot, is just dunk your pot under the water, just so those maggots or pinkies stick to the walls of the pot. The water will make the maggots or pinkies stick to the walls of the pot. So it just makes it a little bit easier to ship out. Let's just see if anything's come to that initial hit of ground bait. So I'm just going to shake those pinkies out now. Not too many at one time, just 2 or 3. Lift my hook bait into position. That's right in the middle of where that cloud of ground bait went in. You'll notice that my float is dotted right down, you know, to literally a pimple. The bites are going to be so tiny today. And that's one of the reasons that I'm only using a short 4-inch hook length. I want to see that bite really quick. I want to see the bottom shot register on the float, and that telltale shot, putting it close to the hook bait, just means that you see your bites a lot quicker and a lot clearer. There you go. We've got one. First chalk. Obviously some fish have homed in onto that ground bait straight away. Don't know what it is. Like I say, it could be anything in this lake. I'm going to take my time. I'm on a little hook. Looks like a little F1. Cracking little fish. Now today is all about just getting a few bites, getting out of the house for a bit, scratching the itch, getting back home. There you go. Little F1, probably about 10 ounce. We've been putting a keep net in so he can go straight back. That's one off the species list. Let's see if we can put a few fish together. Again, I'm going to double pinky. That seemed to work for that fish. Tiny little bite. Another 10 or 15 pinkies in the pot. Got some water in there so they stick to the walls and don't bounce out. Swing the rig out. I always like to swing the rig out first, especially on a long line, then pull the rig into the feed. So now that it's sinking nice and slow through that ground baited area, through the feed, and we're watching that float like a hawk. Just a little tiny dip, and that means the fish has got the bait. There we go, little tiny bite. Just taking my time. I've got ever such a soft elastic in, but that fish splashed on the surface. It's not exactly what we want really. I want to try and keep the disturbance down to a minimum. Using a really soft hollow elastic. even so, these fish aren't fighting very hard. Obviously the water's still pretty cold. Slightly bigger than the last fish, little F1 again. Beautiful fish though. Cracking little fish. I like to plumb up so the base of the bristle is showing, so by the time that's dotted down, I'm guessing we're not even an inch on the bottom sort of thing, so it's pretty sensitive. In the bites aren't the best. Just tap those pinkies in. It's obviously quite shallow out there. Just occasionally when you hook one, you see a bow wave of a decent fish bow waving away. There we go, another fish. It's nice fishing though. Obviously it's a rare mild day today. We've had snow, rain, all sorts. The rivers, anyone else that's been following my stuff maybe 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was on the rivers a hell of a lot, catching some chub, having some really good fishing, but all the rivers are flooded. I mean, there's no chance of getting on the rivers. I mean, I've got a river that's ever so close, sort of, I suppose it's almost a brook that runs through my village that I've been catching a few fish on, but obviously it's absolutely ruined at the minute with all the rain. Hooks just fell out in the net on that one. Again, back to the F1s. We're catching loads of these. Fantastic fish. So obviously we're really limited with the fishing that we can do at the minute, but if you do want to get out, I'm sure there's a few little local venues or a little river, or I'll say even a brook. Go back to your childhood roots and get down the brook with a little rod, see what's in there. I've been really surprised when I've been fishing my local brook, sort of just before Christmas. Some decent chub, roach. It's been really good, so you just don't know what's in these places. And obviously it's nice to have a commercial as close as this for me. There's 3 or 4 lakes here. There's 4 lakes here. There's 2 lakes that are sort of F1s and bigger carp. Another lake that's got a lot of little F1s in, which is a little bit hectic during the summer. There's millions of fish in that lake, and then there's this lake, which is, you know, probably the most enjoyable lake out of the 4. Bunch of fish then. Like I say, it's the variety that I like. It's the fact that you could catch a load of different species. There's a lot of fish there now. I'm getting indications all the time. It's the variety that I like about this lake. Loads of different species. Really easy to fish. I mean, we'd probably get a few bites if we were fishing closer. It doesn't always need a 14.5 metre pole or 16 metre pole to get the most out of this place. And you come down in the summer and there's loads of fish feeding. Let's see what this one is. He's the tiniest of F1s, look. Absolutely tiny, but I missed a few bites then, and I guess It was from either him or a few of his mates. So we'll have to think about how we're going to attack it when we're with our feeding. I might try and just put another little bit of ground bait and just see if we can attract a few bigger fish. We'll do the same thing again, a sloppy ground bait, and just see if it attracts a few better fish.
We do run a few matches. And you know what? I think I fancy a go. Let's put that in a bit better. I think with maybe 10 anglers around the lake, maybe those smaller fish will thin out a little bit and it'll be a case of working a little bit more for your bites rather than a fish every chuck. But there's obviously loads of fish in it. It beats sitting there behind a motionless quiver tip, which is what we tend to do a lot at this time of year. Back on the little fish, tiny little fish again. I think what I'm going to do, just because we're sort of coming near the end of the session, is I'm going to dump in some pinkies and just see if we can feed like a large amount of bait. I say a large amount of bait. I mean, I'm not going to sit there counting them, but I guess 100, 150 pinkies. It's only shallow water out there. And we'll just see if that makes any difference to what we're catching. Might totally ruin the peg, this might, but you never know. Might make a difference, and we're learning all the time. Folks, we tried dumping that bait in, but that wasn't successful. And now I've had a spell filling the pot up every single put in, so like really piling the pinkies in. And we've just started getting some better fish again. And I think the session's coming to the end. I've had a really enjoyable day. We've had, what species have we had? We've had dace, chub, perch, F1s, carp, goldfish, rudd. You know, we've had a real mixture of species, and that, I think, is a beautiful little fish to end on. Until next time, tight lines.